And we'll get going with Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Paul. Good day. I am looking to talk about Pierre-Luc Dubois. Obviously a very talented hockey player, playing a lot, in the middle between two very strong players, particularly obviously in Connor and Nick. But he's got 2 points in his last 9 games. And I know there's an explanation for that. I know there's added responsibilities as being a center. And I'm just kind of curious what you make of that after, I think right before that he had 5 and 2.
So I'm aware of the numbers, and then you ask yourself, like, do you care? And what I mean by that is there a problem with the number as it relates to the way the line or the team's playing? And for me, that there isn't. So so you got 2 kind of goal scorers on the winger, and I think Nicky now views himself as that, which is a huge positive in his game, right? He thinks he's a shooter. He's shooting the puck more. He's scoring a lot more goals, and he really likes playing with Pierre-Luc. What Nicky loves is playing the right side with a left-handed center. And Kyle's, it almost doesn't matter whether the line's scoring or those guys are scoring on the power play. It's the good feeling about how the wingers feel, and they both really like playing with the guy. So the fact that he doesn't have numbers, and then there's the great big number over here that's way more important. It's Winnipeg Jets wins and losses. So then I would say it's not a concern for me. I think that he has probably spent more time laying pucks off to these 2 guys than shooting, which I completely understand. We're not demanding that he shoots the puck. Well, there was the one down the slot the other night that he might have heard he should have shot. But we're kind of letting it grow as the 3 of them. And his game will, I think, eventually become really important to the 2 of them, because what he'll be able to do is hang on to the puck down low in the offensive zone. That's something. Those other 2 guys got to be moving with it, right? They're not going to muscle a puck off the wall, but Pierre-Luc can. So we're going to give this lots of time. We think there's a lot there, and I think probably the only person, Pierre-Luc would be aware of that number and want to contribute more. But I like what him in that hole does for our entire group.
We'll go next to Christian Treptow from NHL.com Germany. Go ahead, Christian.
Hi, Coach. Zdeno Chara turns 44. What are your thoughts about it? Him playing at the NHL level at this age?
Well, it's absolutely incredible. It goes to a lifelong commitment to the things that you have to do physically and mentally to prepare. It goes to a mentality of loving the game so much that you have the willingness to do those things, that you're such a competitor. I consider myself really fortunate. I spent some time with him at the World Cup and got to know him as an exceptionally humble man with all his gifts and his accomplishments. He is a natural born leader. And if there was somebody that could do it, right, play that late, it would be a man like him. Very disciplined, really intelligent player, very competitive man. But he really left an impact on me. This guy's a star, and the way he treated everyone, the coaches, the other players, but the staff, the security, all the people around it, he was just brilliant to watch, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
We'll go next to Ken Weeb from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Weaver.
Morning, Paul. Things generally crank up in the second half, but where will we see the biggest impact in this compressed season and under the circumstances all teams are facing?
Yeah, health is going to be number one, in truth, and it's one of those tough ones that you have a difficult time controlling when you look at all of the schedules now, 17 games, a number of 4-game weeks stacked up, right? The team that can stay the healthiest, number one, and then recover the best is most important. Number 2 would be being able to mentally then do the exact same thing, not get in or out of a rhythm, too high, too low. Certainly too low is the danger here, and being able to kind of rejuvenate yourself mentally. But the physical part, we'll try to get them a rest, but trying to stay positive when your game, because you're going to have up and down, and it is going to be very intense and very competitive. And in the North, it'll be very scrutinized, so all the pressure you can imagine is there. So those kind of mental, physical things will be the key pieces.
We'll go next to Kelly Moore from CJOB. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hey, good morning, Paul.
Morning, Kelly.
I know you said you haven't spent a lot of time looking at the other 3 divisions, but as we're at the halfway mark, how surprising is it that of your former Central Division rivals, that it's Nashville and Dallas that are not above the playoff line in their new groupings? And I'm guessing you're not surprised about the success of everybody else from the division.
No, and Minnesota's just made such an incredible push here this year. Both those teams, I believe, though, and certainly Dallas were greatly impacted by COVID. Right, they had time shut down for themselves, and I mean, you see it in Buffalo. The teams, I think, some of them anyway, and we don't know the inner workings or how the players came out of it or how many were actually sick. Those teams have had an added challenge to what is already a very challenging environment. So I don't know that you can look at that and say either of those teams now are moving in that direction over the next 2 or 3 years. If this thing gets back up and running, all that we would expect to see in the Central is, two of the teams, Minnesota and Chicago, that were at one point, talking about a rebuild, now are fighting and in the playoffs. So the Central will be a beast again next year.
We'll go next to Scott Billick from the Winnipeg Sun. Go ahead, Scott.
Morning, Paul. Question, it's a bit of a two-parter regarding the trade deadline. Obviously a month away, and maybe not on your radar just yet, but how important do you think how diminished maybe do you think first round picks are this year, just based on the world events that are going on right now, limiting hockey? And secondly, how different is it for you this year, kind of knowing likely who your first round opponents are, like the idea of who you might be playing? How much will that factor into who you target based on maybe matchups of the teams that you've played so much this season? The
first question, I can't qualify it. I don't think that I have an understanding of what general managers and scouts, how they're viewing the first part of the draft, right, and how that's going to work. So, I mean, they don't get to see these guys. So I don't know the answer to that because it's not in my realm. I don't think that you ever really, I mean, you might think that you're adding a player for the style of playoffs you're going into, but you almost never play the team you think you're going to end up playing, right? Because there's always upsets and it never works that way. So I think it's needs-based. You'll identify your greatest need, and then you're going to go out there and see if you can fix that, see if you can find the right player to fill that hole. So I don't think our division would say we should get a different style of player because we're going to play this kind of team, when I just don't know that you know that with any certainty.
We'll go next to Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Gregor. Hi, Paul. You touched on it a little bit with your answer to Ken earlier, but in a month like this that's been such a grind, how differently do you manage a game like tonight, knowing there's travel and a back-to-back coming the next night?
You know what? We've been doing that, and it started actually for us in February. Even when our schedule wasn't heavy, we were talking about shift length, line rotation, and that we felt we needed to have that down by March. And I think we have. When you look at, Mark Scheifele's shift length average is under 50, even strength now this year. We've kind of put ourselves into a rhythm, Sean, that tonight's game is going to be like the last or the last 5 on the road prior to that, and what we have going forward. We're going to try to keep our top end under 20. We're going to try to push our fourth line to around that 10-minute mark and manage everybody's minutes. It's in some ways easier to do because your opponent's probably doing the same thing, right? Edmonton's in Calgary tonight. They're gonna be running their bench, and then you'll get into that game, so you have your idea of what that should look like. But then it's all winning that next game, right? But as an overall plan, we've been trying to run a longer bench, if you will, right through March.
We'll go next to Gary Santaniello. Go ahead, Gary.
Hi, Paul. Following up on that, how have you felt about all these 2 and 3 game series this year, especially knowing that, in effect, they're all 4-point games?
Right. I think if you could put fans in the building, I would love for it to be like that forever. There's less wear and tear on the travel. I mean, the isolation is hard to deal with, but because you're staying in the same city, I think you're getting a better quality of road game out of the road team, which may not be great for the home team, but And there's better kind of energy, competition, anger, kind of intensity built into these. I think I think that's going to be true because we're getting into the playoff push right now. Sometimes maybe you see a little bit of familiarity breeding contempt where the game kind of gets bogged down. It's like, oh shit, we're playing Winnipeg again, right? It feels like it's the only team we play. So sometimes there's some of that, but I think playing 2 games, that 2-game block, that home and away block, or 2 games in the other team's city, I think makes for better hockey.
We'll go next to Sarah Oleski from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Paul, will you plan to go with the same lineup as what we saw in Monday night's game? And what did you or will you emphasize to your group based off of Monday's game going into this one?
So we had some events in that game. So answer your question is yes, same lineup. Based on, we had some events that we hadn't seen a whole lot, so we know we've got to be a little bit more diligent with where we put the puck and how we. There's a couple of pretty egregious turnovers that we had that end up with our goalie having no chance. And then we there's some things on our offensive zone play, but that isn't necessarily just a Montreal thing. We're trying to move in a direction of increasing our shot volume a little bit when we have the right opportunity to. So those are the 2 things. We're still very theme oriented, and it's not. I mean, there's certainly a component of each opponent and awareness we have, but we're still truly working on our game.
Go back to Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Paul, you touched on isolation, and that's what I was curious about in the sense that, these guys have their routines. They usually have their routines. They're obviously very close to their teammates, but they're also individuals, and they also have a lot of pressures on themselves, day in and day out in this job. So how top of mind is the isolation for the players, for the team, and what have you guys done to kind of combat the loneliness and effects of isolation?
So part of it was a little bit new. Like even in the bubble, we didn't have this kind of experience. It was a different experience because we weren't trained cities. And there was, there's like 6 teams in the hotel, right? So there's a ton of people around you, and you're isolated in a bubble, but there might be 500 people in that bubble. So you had human interaction. And then this is a different animal. So the first thing is, we recognized it, I think, first on this last trip because it was 11 days, and it was the first time maybe we started to feel it a little bit, and then just start talking about it and making sure we're getting around to everybody, just checking in with them more. We had kind of a completely different day between the 2nd and 3rd Toronto day. We came in, just talked about it, kicked everybody out, go stand outside for a little while. And then we started talking about, are there things we can do with our team that are, we need to get them out of the rink. We need to get them together, because even just getting them together is a challenge, right? There's only 3 or 4 guys at a table in the room. You're supposed to sit at the same table. You're really not supposed to mingle. So it's where can we stay within the protocol of the NHL, but also be mindful that we'd like to spend some time together, just conversations, and stay safe. So I don't know. I don't have a solution to it yet, Jeff, but we're very aware of it because we felt it, right? When you grab players, I started asking them kind of during that trip, and they'd stop and kind of look you in the eye and say, yeah, you know what, this has been tough. This is way tougher than I thought it would be. So you become mindful of it. You start talking about it in front of the group and making sure they're all aware that if they ever needed to speak to somebody outside of our group, that we have that resource. And we're, Project 11 is a big part of what the Winnipeg Jets do. So they've heard it enough. They know it's available for them. So we've just made sure they're aware of it.
And final question to Kelly Moore from CJOB. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hey, Paul, a 3rd member of your fraternity lost his job earlier today. And you were just talking to Hammy about isolation and feeling alone. Because you've gone kind of through what maybe Ralph Kruger did go through this last 3 or 4 weeks or so in Buffalo, is that a helpless feeling when your team is struggling and you just don't know how to fix it, and you know that something like this morning is coming?
Well, you have all of these experiences as a coach that when you get to those positions, you got things you can do, right? And then you are in, and I don't know, I know that Buffalo has been through a real difficult time with COVID. Ralph went through it, players have gone through it. So then there's all of this complete newness. So a lot of your toolbox maybe doesn't apply. So there's a real challenge to what all these teams, what we're all going through when you get on one of those ruts that you're having a hard time get out. I mean, I texted briefly with Ralph a couple of weeks ago. Nobody likes to talk about it when things aren't going well, so I'll give him a call here in 2 or 3 days. It's just such an incredibly challenging environment for all of us. I don't know what it's like in this environment to go through what he was going through, but your passion for winning and your passion for the people that you work with, and it's not just about keeping your job, it's about, you know, trying to get those guys to feel good, to win, to enjoy being around themselves when it's not going. It is a lonely, lonely place to be as the head guy, and it can be an incredible challenge.
Thanks very much, Coach.
Okay, guys.